It was a cold winter morning in Chicago, USA. Snow covered the sidewalks, and people hurried past, focused on their own busy lives. Cars honked, coffee shops buzzed, and the city moved fast. Too fast to notice one old man sitting alone on a bench. His name was George Miller, a 72-year-old grandfather. He wore an old brown coat, thin gloves, and a worn scarf that barely protected him from the freezing wind. His hands trembled and his breathing was heavy. Tears slowly rolled down his wrinkled face. George wasn't begging. He wasn't drunk. He was in trouble. "Please, someone help me," he whispered weakly, clutching his chest. People walked by. Some glanced for a second. Most didn't even look. Across the street, a sleek black luxury car stopped at the traffic light. Inside sat Richard Coleman, a 45-year-old millionaire businessman. He was dressed in an expensive suit, scrolling through emails on his phone. His company had just secured a multi-million-dollar deal, and he was in a hurry to celebrate. As the light stayed red, Richard noticed the old man crying on the bench. He frowned. "Another homeless problem," he muttered, shaking his head. George slowly slid off the bench and collapsed onto the icy sidewalk. A few pedestrians gasped, but no one stepped forward. Richard watched for a moment, then sighed impatiently. "Not my responsibility," he said, pressing the accelerator as the light turned green. His car sped away, leaving the old man lying helpless in the snow. Seconds later, the deep rumble of a motorcycle echoed down the street. A rugged biker wearing a black helmet and leather jacket rode toward the intersection. His name was Daniel Walker, a 42-year-old mechanic known around the neighborhood as quiet but kind. As Daniel approached, he noticed a small crowd forming, but no one helping. He immediately slowed down. Something felt wrong. He parked his motorcycle on the side of the road, removed his helmet, and pushed through the crowd. "What happened?" he asked urgently. A woman shrugged. "Old man just fell. Maybe drunk." Daniel knelt beside George and gently touched his shoulder. Sir, can you hear me?" he asked. George's eyes opened slightly. His voice was barely a whisper. "My heart, please." Daniel's face turned serious. This wasn't drunkenness. This was a medical emergency. Without hesitation, Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. "A 72-year-old male, possible heart attack," he reported calmly. "A corner of Maple and 3rd Street. Send an ambulance immediately." Then he removed his own thick jacket and placed it under George's head to keep him warm. He held the old man's hand and spoke in a steady, reassuring voice. "You're going to be okay, sir. Stay with me." Snow continued falling around them. Cars passed. People watched, but Daniel didn't move. Minutes later, sirens echoed through the streets. An ambulance arrived, and paramedics rushed to George's side. They quickly placed him on a stretcher and began treatment. One of the paramedics looked at Daniel. "You saved his life," she said. "If you hadn't called when you did, he might not have survived." Daniel nodded quietly. He didn't smile. He didn't ask for recognition. He simply picked up his helmet and returned to his motorcycle. But the story wasn't over. 3 days later, Daniel was working inside his small repair shop. Grease covered his hands as he fixed an old engine. Business had been slow, and bills were piling up. Still, he worked hard every day, never complaining. Suddenly, a black luxury car pulled up outside the shop. The same car that had passed George on the street. Richard Coleman stepped out, looking nervous. Daniel barely glanced up. "Need something fixed?" he asked casually. Richard hesitated. "Are you Daniel Walker?" he asked. Daniel wiped his hands with a cloth. "Yes." Richard took a deep breath. "I came to thank you." Daniel looked confused. For what?" Richard's voice softened. "The man you saved, George Miller, he's my father." Silence filled the garage. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Richard continued, guilt written across his face. "I saw him that morning," he admitted quietly. "I saw him fall, and I drove away before I saw him fall." He looked down at the ground, ashamed. "I was too busy, too selfish. I thought someone else would help." Daniel said nothing. Richard swallowed hard. The doctors told me he survived because you acted quickly. They said another 5 minutes, and he would have died." His voice cracked. "Almost lost my father because I ignored him." For the first time in his life, the millionaire had nothing to say. No money, no power, no success could erase that moment. Then Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I want to help you," he said. "Oh, there's a check inside." Enough to expand your shop, hire workers, whatever you need. Please accept it." Daniel looked at the envelope but didn't take it. Instead, he asked a simple question. "How is your father?" Richard blinked, surprised. "He's recovering," he said. "He keeps asking about the biker who saved him." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's all that matters," he replied. Richard stepped closer. "Please," he insisted. "You deserve this." Daniel finally took the envelope, but instead of opening it, he placed it back into Richard's hand. "Didn't save him for money," he said calmly. Richard stood frozen. Richard stood frozen. Daniel continued, "If you really want to thank me, spend more time with your father. Listen to him. Take care of him." His voice was firm but kind. "That's worth more than any check." Tears filled Richard's eyes. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, not employees, not business partners, not friends. He realized something powerful in that moment. Respect isn't bought with money, it's earned through compassion. 1 week later, George Miller walked slowly into Daniel's repair shop, supported by his son Richard. The old man looked healthier, but still fragile. Still fragile. As soon as he saw Daniel, his eyes filled with gratitude. "That's him," George whispered. "My hero." Daniel looked embarrassed. "I'm no hero," he replied gently. George reached out and grabbed Daniel's hand. "You gave me more time to live," he said emotionally. "More time with my family. That's the greatest gift anyone could give." Richard stood beside them, silent but deeply moved. Then, in front of everyone inside the shop, the millionaire did something unexpected. He removed his expensive suit jacket and shook Daniel's hand with both of his hands. Not as a businessman. As a businessman. Not as a millionaire, but as a grateful son. "A thank you," Richard said sincerely. Customers and workers inside the garage watched quietly. In that simple moment, something changed. The richest man in the room wasn't the millionaire. It was the biker with a kind heart. Sometimes the person with the least money has the most humanity, and one small act of kindness can save a life and change another forever.